Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Theology Unbound. As you can see, Jackie looks a little different today. This is Pastor Mark, and we are going to get in and discuss a hot topic about Christian nationalism. And I'm just going to ask Mark a little bit about his ministry and history of walking with the Lord. So stay tuned. Here we go. All right. Well, there's here at Buell Bible Church, formerly known as Calvary Chapel, Buell. There are three pastors on staff: Jackie, Mark, and me. Jackie is the assistant, Mark is the assistant. He's the administrative pastor, so he actually is probably the one most people see throughout the week at the church. And if any of you have heard him preach, you know that he is probably most well known for his amazing presentation of the prosperity gospel. I'm just kidding.
I was about to say you're so professional, but I'm just not going to say that now.
No, he's actually bold enough to call people out by name from the pulpit, which I think needs to happen more and more across our country. So let's get into it a little bit. Since this is your first time on the podcast, but even though the podcast is new and most people that are listening already know you, there's some listeners in Tennessee and Virginia and Russia and New Zealand.
Cool.
Unless you know people in New Zealand.
I do not know anyone in New Zealand.
Okay, well, there's some people there. So let's just start at how long have you been here at Buell?
I've been
At Buell Bible Church, in the church.
6 years in the church, 5 years on the staff.
And you've told me this story a couple times of you thought you were done with ministry.
Yes.
You guys moved from San Diego.
Yes.
You guys were in Riverside County.
Yeah, my wife and I were ministering in the Salvation Army.
Yeah.
I was serving as an assistant pastor, and we started in Riverside. We got transferred to San Diego.
How long were you guys in the Salvation Army?
I was in for almost 7 years. My wife for 6.
Okay. All right.
So we were both active for the whole 7 years, but I was paid for 7. She was paid for 6.
Yeah. Yeah. The Salvation Army is near and dear to me because I went through the Adult Rehabilitation Center in Las Vegas, and the Salvation Army is a huge network of system, the way it works.
For sure. They do great work.
Yeah. Yeah. They have been for a while. So you guys, all right. So you're starting in the Salvation Army and then you moved to San Diego.
Yes, we were transferred from Riverside to San Diego.
You were serving under a couple there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how was that? How was San Diego?
It was a very difficult ministry.
What exactly did you do?
So I served as assistant pastor in one of the churches actually in downtown San Diego. My primary responsibility was overseeing the homeless programs.
Yeah, and if anybody's been to San Diego, you would know that the homeless population in San Diego is pretty rampant.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and maybe that's just because the weather's so nice there that people feel like they can live there all year round. And part of it probably has to do with it's California too. And we see in a lot of those Californian cities that the homeless populations are growing and growing.
Yeah, for sure. The average temperature all year round in San Diego is like 76 degrees.
The easiest job in the world would be to be the weather guy for San Diego. Yeah. Well, today it's going to be nice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So homeless ministry, I mean, that is a tough, no doubt, hard ministry.
It was hard. So we started out with homeless ministry and recovery ministry in Riverside. They transferred us to San Diego because for two reasons. I think there was an opening there that they needed to fill. And we had experience, my wife and I had experience in dealing with the homeless community. It was a passion of ours.
Yeah, for sure.
But the magnitude was incredibly more in San Diego. In Riverside, we dealt with 100, 150 homeless people. In San Diego, we dealt with hundreds.
Yeah. I'm sure on a daily basis, it was just massive.
Yeah. And
you were doing recovery ministry before Salvation Army. You guys were leading Celebrate Recovery.
Correct. Yeah.
Which is it 12 steps, yeah?
It's a 12-step program.
Yeah. What's so great about Celebrate Recovery, though, is it takes the 12 steps of AA and NA and it puts Jesus as the higher power. So that means I can't make the doorknob my higher power. Well, first off, in AA, that's one of the biggest problems, that you can make your own higher power. You choose what your higher power is.
Exactly. Many times I had people come to me and say, my higher power is going to be a tree.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well,
And I would look to them and say, well, so if you really believe a tree can help you, then you might have more problems than we can help you with. So why don't we do this? Let's just say your higher power is Jesus and see what happens.
yeah. Start there.
Yeah.
I'm definitely familiar with AA and NA and Celebrate Recovery. And when your recovery is based and centered on Jesus, I truly believe that's the only way you're going to fully recover, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally and spiritually as well.
Yeah, for sure. You can address the physical, the mental, and the emotional components of any addiction. But if you don't address the spiritual component, you're going to be what I used to call a dry drunk. You're going to be hanging on by the tips of your fingers.
Yeah.
And until that spiritual component is addressed,
Right.
You're going to continue to struggle with
That's
temptation.
true. Some of the most miserable people I've ever met in my life were people that had 25 years alcohol free, but they were miserable. They were still in bondage and they were enslaved in their minds to all these other things. And one of the things about Celebrate Recovery is that it actually, it's not just focused on drugs and alcohol.
No, it's on
Every kind of addiction.
any kind of problem you have, you can address through Celebrate Recovery.
Yeah, there's even a part of it for people that are struggling with enabling an addict, I think, or that are going through that.
All kinds of, they call them life issues. So
Yeah.
all kinds of life issues, anything that's holding you back.
Well, I'm a firm believer that God in our ministries, that he's always preparing us for the next thing. And so during Celebrate Recovery, I'm sure you could say that he was preparing you for what was going to happen in San Diego when you started dealing with these homeless people.
For sure, big time.
Because, I mean, some of it's mental, some of it's addiction, some of it's both.
Yeah. In Riverside, we dealt with drug and alcohol problems, obviously, because we had Celebrate Recovery going.
Yeah.
And other issues. But in San Diego, that aspect of the recovery ministry was so much more difficult. It had such a hold on most of the people we dealt with.
Yeah.
I mean, I would literally go out on the sidewalk outside the church and take away vodka from somebody that I was working with and say, dude, you're going to die here if you keep this up.
Right.
Don't make me come find your body.
Right. Exactly.
And he would say, oh, yeah. And he'd do good for a couple of days and then he'd be right back at it again.
Yeah. That's probably a ministry that needs to be ran on the power of the Holy Spirit, because there's not much encouragement. I mean, there is encouragement when you see success stories, but when you're dealing with somebody over, and then I'm sure there's plenty of guys or plenty of people that did die. I mean,
yeah, for sure. We experienced some loss.
So one of the things you had told me about before was that you did you ran like a shower ministry.
That was in Riverside, yeah.
That was in Riverside.
That was interesting, yeah.
Yeah, shower for the homeless people.
Yeah.
I mean, what a great ministry that is, but what a difficult one that must be.
Yeah, it was cool. You could, it was all homeless people that took advantage of it, obviously. But
for sure.
Anyone could come and sign up and say they want to take a shower.
Yeah.
And they would get a token, and then they would come and turn the token in for their turn in the shower. They were required to clean it after they were done.
I'm sure that was easy to get everybody on board for that.
It was.
Yeah, oh, good.
The difficult part was getting them to come out after their 5 minutes were up.
I'm sure they liked a nice little room all to themselves.
Yeah.
I'm not coming out of here. I got water and
Exactly.
Privacy. I'll take it. So you guys were at San Diego, and then the Lord moved you up here.
Yes.
And that was what, 2017? Or was it earlier than that? Or later
17,
than that?
18, somewhere around
Yeah.
there.
And you ended up here while this was Calvary Chapel Buell.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said at the beginning, you were pretty much done with ministry at that point. You didn't want to do it anymore.
I was. The Salvation Army had a big consolidation in California. And so they had double people for our roles, my wife and I. And so they laid us off. And to be fair to them, they laid us off with a very generous severance package.
Yeah.
But we found ourselves with no job in San Diego, and no way to support ourselves. So we decided to move up here. My son had already relocated here and was starting a business here. So we came up here and joined him.
Yeah, fantastic. And you became a part of the church, and eventually a part of the elder board.
Yeah.
Yeah, which that then progressed to back into a pastoral position.
Yeah, we'd been here maybe 2 weeks, and Jackie and Kathy took us out to lunch one afternoon. And we told them our story, and Jackie said, "So where can I plug you in?"
Yeah, of course.
And I said,
"Where can I get you started at?"
I said, "No, sorry, God closed that door. I'm just going to sit under your teaching." But God had another plan.
Yeah, for sure. That's when you're called to ministry, you know it from the people that He puts around you, and the even sitting under the preaching of His Word and how He moves you into the position. And so you end up as the administrative assistant pastor, filling into the preaching roles when Jackie's gone most of the time. And we also, out of our church, have a daycare that you help oversee all week long.
Yes.
So it's a full-time thing for sure.
Yep, it is. It's a blessing.
Yeah, great. So we're gonna so this topic, we're gonna talk about Christian nationalism a little bit. Brother came up to me during church yesterday, and he's like, "Oh, we were already thinking about talking about this." I think me and you. So the way it works around here is most of my theological conversations happen with Jackie, and then most of my political conversations happen with you. It's just the way it is. Jackie's really focused on it's not that he's not involved in politics. He just is really focused on the theological aspect of things. And we like to discuss politics and culture and the country and those things a little bit more. So that's why I feel comfortable talking with you about Christian nationalism than anyone else, really. The phrase Christian nationalism, and the brother I was talking to was saying, it would be great for you guys to talk about it because there's just some people that take it too far, which I agree with. There is an aspect of it that is far and it's dangerous, and it gets to a point where it's unbiblical.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I think a good place to start is not the Christian aspect. We know what the Christian aspect is, but the nationalist aspect. So if we're going to talk about Christian nationalism, then we gotta talk about nationalism.
Exactly.
First off, we got to lay the foundation of nationalism. Is nationalism okay?
I think it is.
Right. Yeah. So do I.
So how would you define nationalism?
That's a good question, because if we part of this is bringing terms and words in that have been so propagandized to mean something that they're not. Even the phrase Christian nationalism, if you've learned what Christian nationalism is from mainstream media, you have a flawed definition of what Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism isn't something that started with Donald Trump, or it's a Project 2025 or any of those things. Though they want to associate him with all of that to demonize it, but terms like ethnicity, race, racism, white privilege, these terms have been, the definition of them has been changed, probably especially over like the last 10, 15 years to with so much of a negative connotation on it.
Right.
So when we're talking about nationalism, what is a nation? And I'm going to say the word ethnicity has a big part to do with it. And when I say ethnicity, this is super important. I don't mean two people that are the same color. So you have different races, different bloods, different races of people that have their bloodline from different areas of the world. But an ethnicity is a shared heritage, a shared family line, a shared culture. I would even say a shared religion, a shared set of beliefs, a shared set of laws. So you could say George Washington, one of the founders, and Booker T. Washington, who was black, they had the same ethnicity.
I would agree with that. So I would say that nationalism is the idea of a group of people who share a similar cultural ideology.
Right.
So they recognize that they are part of a country, part of a nation, and that they want to see that nation move forward in peace and harmony and for the good of all people that are living in that nation. So,
Yeah.
so you don't have a black nationalism or a white nationalism. You have an American nationalism.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's where things start to get messy and where people start to get a little closed off to the term Christian nationalism. And as we get more into it, there's different aspects, there's different approaches. The thing about the nation is a nation is similar to a lot of the guys I listen to. They talk about these different spheres that God has created. You have the family sphere,
Right.
You have the ecclesiastical sphere, which is the church, and then you have the civil sphere. And the goal is that each sphere has its own responsibilities. And Jackie was just preaching on this through Romans recently, where the governmental, the civic sphere, doesn't cross over into the family sphere or the ecclesiastical sphere.
Right.
Each one has its own purpose.
But in order for that to work, they have to work in conjunction with each other. So the family sphere has to fulfill its responsibility to the family and the culture.
Right.
And the church sphere, or the ecclesiastical sphere, has to fulfill its responsibility to the culture and the church.
Yeah.
And the same with the civic sphere.
Yeah, I think one of the issues that people have when they think of Christian nationalism is they think that the church is trying to get into this place where they're responsible for bearing the sword to either go to war or put people to death or punishment for crime. But that's laid out very specifically for us in the Bible, particularly in Romans 13, where Paul says the government, they're a servant of God for good. They're to punish the evildoer and to reward those who do good.
Yeah. We've seen how it plays out when the church tries to take that responsibility.
Yeah. Church history is messy with that.
And it's been bad.
Yeah, that's it. The church needs to stay in the role that it's in.
Yeah.
And one of the things is a big aspect of this that I've been learning is thinking in categories. So thinking in categories of like you're Christians, you're a Christian. We're both husbands and fathers. We have those categories. We particularly are pastors, so we're in the ecclesiastical sphere, but not everybody is a pastor. Not everyone's called to be a pastor.
Right.
Some people are called to be lawyers or doctors or pilots or whatever, I mean, there's different aspects of life to where people are called, and each sphere requires something different. For instance, I don't talk to my child in the family sphere the same way that I talk to you, So if
it's a good thing.
I know I give my child way more respect. No, I'm just kidding. No, but this is where the categories come in. If we and this has been such a hot topic because the border is a big one, right? The border of our nation is a big one.
Yeah.
And we have to look throughout history. And I don't know if you read the book by R.R. Reno, The Return of the Strong Gods, but man, it really lays out what has happened since World War I and World War II as far as open and free societies, and just the liberal order and how it's opened up nations to just be free to go to and fro any nation. And we're starting to see that maybe that's not the best way. Maybe that just allowing people to come into your nation and do this multicultural idea is not the best way. Multiculturalism in itself, again, I'm not saying multiracial, multiculture.
Right.
And the culture having different aspects of your belief, your heritage, and religion ties into this because a lot of the belief systems, especially throughout 2,000 years, is the culture was built off the religion. And you really still see that in the world today. I mean, look at Iran, Iraq, where Muslim countries are. They're centered on their religion, Islam.
Right. I think we can take a look around the world today and in fact, even in our own country, and say that multiculturalism as an experiment has been a failure.
Yeah, I would think so.
Now, I would say that our original concept that, come to the United States, all of you people who would desire freedom and health and prosperity, come to the U.S. I think in the beginning that was a successful plan because we had cultures come here and at least to a large extent, they learned our language. They became Americans.
Yeah, language, that's another one too. That's a
Yeah.
big one.
They many of them were already some sort of Protestant, and so they became that melting pot.
You're right.
And we retained our national identity, and they came into that national identity.
The identity that we had already established.
Right. Whereas today we see cultures coming in and they don't learn the language.
Right.
They don't agree with our political ways. They don't obey the laws. And I'm not saying every refugee or every person who comes in is evil.
No, not at all. It's not a generalization. That's just
right.
that we're seeing this in different aspects.
But you can you brought up Islam. So let's take a look around the world today.
Right.
Countries that have widely welcomed Islam into their country. Britain is practically Islamic now.
Yeah, so they're running things.
Yeah, and there's many places in Europe that are the same way. France is the same way. And we have cities in the United States that are practically under Sharia law.
Dearborn, Michigan's a big one.
Yeah.
And it's happening more and more.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to tread very cautiously with welcoming Islam in, because Islam is a very aggressive and dangerous religion to have around. Jihad, you hear the word jihad, terrorist. Well, that's part of it, So people that they look at, it's kind of the same way they do with Christians. They look at terrorists that are practicing Islam. Well, they say they're extremists. Well, no, they're just practicing it. It's like a Christian. You see a Christian that seems like a Puritan and doesn't have sex before marriage and doesn't do drugs or alcohol and goes to church and lives a straight life, dresses modestly and does all those things. Someone might say, well, they're just an extremist. No, they're just a Christian. They're just practicing their religion.
Right.
So back to the nation.
So let me just put a disclaimer here, because I know we're going to hear about this.
Oh, for sure.
I'm not saying that we should not allow Islamic peoples into the country.
Not at all.
I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that they should expect when they get here to at least learn the language. So let me reverse this. So if I were under persecution in this country, or I could not make a living in this country, or political issues forced me out of this country, and I went to, let's say, Mexico, because it's a close shot from here.
Yeah.
I would learn the language. I would do everything I could to learn the language.
I would want to, I would think.
Yeah, I would dress like they dress.
Yeah.
As much as possible,
Right.
I would dress like they do. I would want to become part of their culture.
Right.
And if I didn't want to do that, then maybe I should stay here.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. So when we think of the nation, before we add the Christianness to it, we think of the nation, we're thinking of America. To put this on a scale that helps me understand, my family is my family. I have a house I live in with my family. I have a fence around my property, and it's my family. My door isn't open for the whole world to just come live in my house.
Nor should it be.
Right. No, it's not. I don't think that's biblical, because I don't think that's honoring God or loving your neighbor by allowing who knows in to your own house.
Right.
So if it's okay to be, because one of the arguments people say about Christian nationalism is that a nation cannot be Christian. A nation cannot be redeemed. And I agree. Okay, a nation cannot be redeemed in the sense of salvation like a human being can be redeemed.
I agree with that as well.
But you can have a Christian family. A family where, look, at my dinner table, we say grace, we have a Bible study, we do worship under the Lord. While my kids are living under my roof, they're going to learn about God. Even with businesses, there's Christian-run businesses, Christian coffee shops.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Well, it means that when you go into the atmosphere, there's probably Christian music playing. The shirts they sell, their logo probably has something Christian on it. So the theme Christian is there. The owners are born again, most likely, if they're running a Christian coffee shop. So when we're talking about a Christian nation, we're not talking about, the nation itself is redeemed and it's all Christian. The Christianity is influencing the culture that makes American Christian.
Right. I think when we're talking about a Christian nation, we're talking about a nation that's culture, its customs, its laws are oriented around what is taught in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of nation, I believe, would be the very best nation for any person to live in.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you have to have nations, and the reason why I believe you have to have nations is because you can't make a biblical case. I don't believe you can. When Jesus gave the Great Commission, he said, "Go disciple the nations."
Mm-hmm.
He didn't say go out and make them all one globalist thing.
Right.
And then in the book of Revelation, it says that standing before God's throne, they're all worshiping, and it's people from every tribe, nation, tongue.
Yeah.
So in the end, there's going to be nations. Plural.
Even in Acts, it says God establishes the nations and their borders and the times that people will live there.
Yeah, and I think what is so challenging about this for some of us is that because we're American and because we've lived in America that's been so open and so people are so easily able to come and start their own culture here, we're immersed in a place now that it's hard for us to think of something different.
Right. So this, to me, this comes down to a worldview perspective, and this is something that I've been passionate about my entire ministry. Is that, I love to sit and talk about eschatology, but for me, the focus of my ministry is how does my Christian belief play out in my daily life?
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, there are times when that's a very difficult thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that passion has been to walk people who are struggling with that along the path of figuring out. So how does your worldview, what is your worldview, first of all? And how does that affect how you live your life? So let's go back to me going to Mexico.
Yeah.
Okay. Because my worldview would be, okay, I'm escaping this place to go to this place. I'm going to do the best I can to fit in at the place I'm going, not just for my benefit, although probably primarily for my benefit, but also for the benefit of the people around me.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to cook cheeseburgers on the weekend and eat cheeseburgers.
Yeah.
But for the important things, the way the country's laws are developed, the cultures of the countries, the dress, the language, the religion, I'm going to do my best to promote that within my own family and within my community.
So we could talk on this forever. We're not going to lay everything down in just one episode, but getting the idea that the nation is a good thing. Having a nation is a good thing.
Yes.
That is not a bad thing. So we have to get that thinking out of our mind that having a nation with borders, with culture, with customs, with heritage, that's a good thing.
Yes, for sure.
And so we're going to eventually talk about worldview a little bit, but in the Christian nationalist movement, there's a couple big names that have been proponents of this. Doug Wilson has been post-millennial. He would never design the term. Understand, the term Christian nationalism wasn't designed by Christians. It was designed by the left to make Christians look bad.
Yeah, it's a pejorative term.
Yeah. But his work of expanding the gospel and doing these things has been phenomenal. His ministry, I was just up there and just the printing press of his ministry is a warehouse of tens of thousands of books. And I was just blown away when I saw all that. So he wrote a book called Mere Christendom that explains kind of the history of Christianity throughout the world and where we're at, how we've got to where we've got today through revivals and through the church working and keeping the sacraments and all of those things. And then the other one is Stephen Wolf's book, The Case for Christian Nationalism, which has been a controversial book since it's come out. But I think the problem that the people misrepresent him all the time, and they're putting things into his mouth that he's not saying. So you got Doug Wilson's book, and there's more. I'm just giving an example of two, who has this bottom-up approach. When we say bottom-up, it means it starts with us, and then as the nation becomes more Christianized, as the church fulfills the Great Commission, pretty soon everybody's just Christian, and we're a Christian nation.
Right.
And then the top-down approach is that we want Christian leaders. We want a Christian president. We want a Christian Congress. We want Christian governors. We want Christian mayors. And we want to establish those people that rule Christianity. And people would say that that's dangerous because you're saying that Christianity is then ruled with an iron fist from those positions. And then you're forcing people to be Christians, which is not what I believe, nor you believe.
Well, it's not Christianity.
It's not Christianity. Forcing people, which we've seen this in history happen, and it's been really bad. So when we say Christian nationalism, if I say I'm a Christian nationalist, I don't mean that I want somebody to rule with an iron fist that is forcing Christianity. You're forced to be a Christian by the sword, basically. The civil sphere is forcing you to be a Christian.
Yeah, that's happened in the past. We don't want to do that again.
Yeah. The civil sphere remains the civil sphere. But I'm telling you, what we were just talking about is we don't want, if anything, Christians should want the government to be much, much smaller.
Absolutely.
Not bigger, but much smaller.
Much smaller.
They have too much reign as it is, and they've already crossed over the ecclesiastical sphere and the family sphere.
Yeah.
So we want to see that shrink down to what it should be, of bearing the sword to punish the evildoer and to reward those who do good.
And to protect the nation.
And to protect the nation, yeah. And I don't think anybody would do the job better than Christians. I think Christians that are led by the Spirit of God can be civic rulers. And I think they should be.
I would agree with that. But there has to be safeguards built in.
For sure.
Because we know, you and I know, I'm assuming most of our listeners would agree, that we're all subject to evil impulses.
For sure. I mean, we see it in the church all the time.
Yeah. And I think we started that way. We started off with a constitution and a Declaration of Independence that was at least based in Christian thought.
Yeah.
And safeguards were built into those. You know, we started with 3 branches of government instead of a monarchy.
Yeah. The checks and balances are super important.
There were checks and balances built into the Constitution. Over time, the government has done exactly what people do, and it has expanded and enlarged and enriched itself. I'm going to say off the backs of the American taxpayers. It has catered to special interest groups, and it's so out of control now. I'm not sure we can rein it back in. Not
without a miracle of God.
For sure, yeah.
You know, I mean, without an outpouring of His Spirit, I think it can be both approaches where we vote in. We go to the voting booth and we vote for whoever has the most Christian principles, who's going to enforce Christian laws, who's not going to expand the government but work to shrink the government. And the church also fulfills the Great Commission in our country, and we evangelize, and more people are born again. And with that, you know, that maybe we can see the country take a turn, but we are at this point we're so multicultural that even talk like this, like what we're talking about, people would say that's, you guys are racist and you guys are Nazis and you guys are Hitler.
I'm ready for the email.
Well, you can send them all. I'll make sure Mark at Buell Bible Church. Make sure you send them to him. But it's important. So if you're going to the voting booth and you want to vote for a Christian, if you want a Christian leader and you want Christian laws, look, I don't want my children growing up in a nation where it's drag queen story hour on every corner.
No, well, my children are grown, but I don't want my grandchildren growing up in that.
Yeah, exactly. Or my grandchildren. I'm thinking about my grandchildren. I don't want my grandchildren growing up where they go to the public school and the public school has the power over them. This is an example of the government having too much power, where the school can actually have the parents persecuted if the parents aren't calling their child by the pronoun they want to be called by. Yeah. And we're seeing that happen.
Yep, for sure. It's happened in multiple states.
Yeah.
California, for one, where a teacher has been fired from their tenured position for refusing to allow a male into the girls' locker room.
Right. It's
for
insane.
Refusing to call a male a girl, and being willing to tell their parents that that's what the child wants, to be called a girl. And the school districts have fired multiple teachers for those reasons. And in one of the cases I know of, the teacher said to the school board or to the school administrators, so what you're telling me is I have to go against my deeply held Christian beliefs and lie to the parents.
Right.
And they said yes.
And that is Acts 5:29. We must obey God rather than men. And God has laid it out very clear for us what he wants from us. Jesus said, render the things that belong to Caesar, and the things that belong to God, to God. The family belongs to God. The church belongs to God. Caesar, the civic sphere that Caesar rules and reigns, we render to him our taxes. We render to him our obedience as far as he is being obedient to God in his rule. And so, I don't want my kids, when I'm voting for somebody, I'm not voting for the person who's going to enforce pagan laws into my society. I don't want my kids growing up in a place like that. So when I say I'm a Christian nationalist, that's what I mean. I mean, I want to vote for people who are going to uphold the rule of law, that are hopefully born again, on fire Christians that know the word of God, not a Christian in name only, but an actual Christian who knows the word of God, who is, Pete Hegseth wrote a book, The Battlefield of the American Mind, or The Battle of the American Mind. And when you read it, you can say, this dude is a Christian. Yeah. This guy knows the word of God and he knows what he's doing. And so when I see people like that, that's what I want. That, as a Christian, that's what I want. If you're going to the voting block and you're saying, I want the guy who's going to be the most Christian, you're holding to what I would claim for myself as Christian nationalism.
So here's the problem. What happens when you go to the voting booth and neither candidate is a Christian?
Well, this is where it kind of becomes challenging. So again, you're going to have to look at what are their policies?
Exactly.
What do each, and I would say that we just went through that.
We did just go through that.
Because I don't believe Donald Trump is a Christian. I don't see, I hope that he becomes a Christian, but I don't know that I see the fruit in his life that he's actually a born again Christian yet. But I have no problem voting for Donald Trump because of the policies,
right? Because
of what he wants for the country and the nation.
Yeah, and I did not agree with all of his policies. I still don't agree with all of his policies.
Yeah, neither do I.
But so here's something that happens. A candidate like Donald Trump gets elected, and then the people that voted for him, they become cheerleaders, and they refuse to hold him accountable to the things that are not what we voted for. So for example, abortion.
Abortion's a huge one.
I never liked Donald Trump's position on abortion in this election cycle, but I did like enough of his other policies to say, okay, I compare him with the alternative, and he's way up in the good scale as opposed to the alternative. It was, in my opinion, way down in the evil scale.
Right.
So even though I didn't agree with his abortion policies, and I still don't, I voted for him. But the difference, I think, between me and a lot of voters is I'm willing to call him out.
For sure.
I'm willing to write him letters and send him emails and say, dude, you can't do this.
And every Christian needs to be like that.
Every Christian should do
Every
this.
Christian that, and abortion is a huge issue for Christians, and it needs to be. If you're a Christian, abortion is probably the number one issue. I mean, 65 million babies have been murdered in the womb in our country. And, God is not going to let us get away with that.
Right.
So when this is the challenge, we've gone so far down this road because we've gotten away from Christian rule and reign and from Christian law, and we've been invaded by secularism, that the idea of a perfect pro-life candidate, we're a long ways away from, it seems like.
Yeah, we are.
So we have to work. This is what Doug Wilson calls it. He calls it smash mouth incrementalism.
Yeah.
We have to be wise, and we have to work our way there, one vote at a time, to get to where we want it.
And this is what I like about his prescription on how to fix this. You said, I forget. So Stephen Wolf wants to do a top down. He wants to do a bottom up.
Yeah, right.
Doug Wilson wants to do a bottom up. And this is where I think we as the church have failed. So when was the last time you heard a pastor or a church leader say, brother, you are gifted in politics. You should run for whatever office?
That's not very often.
We should be encouraging believers
Yeah.
to do those things. We should learn to recognize a person who has those skills, and then we should encourage them to do that.
Yeah, which is, I think we should talk about worldview for a few minutes before we end. We'll do another episode on this, but I want to get into that a little bit. But let me say this, because I do want to warn of the where the Christian nationalism, where when they say it as a derogatory term, where they're right in saying that. Because people are taking it too far.
Right.
And this is where they take Stephen Wolf's book even, and they take it way out of context and they take it too far.
Yeah.
It's when you say that America was founded by white Christian men and we need to be a white Christian country, and they add, so your race is into it now, and we as a Christian nation need to enforce God's law so hard that we kick every other person that's of any other color and not a Christian out of the country. And then we rebuild as white only. There are groups like that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few of them out there.
Yeah.
And they actually have a pretty loud voice.
And they're crazy.
They're absolutely crazy. It's not biblical.
No.
Their exegesis of some passages of scripture is insane.
Yeah.
It's just their baseline of their understanding of scripture is wrong. So of course they're coming and they're saying, they believe they're a white supremacist, or they're a racist in those terms of, I think that the white race is the blessed race because of Christianity, and we need to enforce that only. So when we say we're Christian nationalists, we're not saying that we are white supremacists.
No, there is no room for racism in the life of a Christian.
None
at all.
None at all.
Yeah.
There's conversations to be had about race, but none that leave you as thinking your race is better than another race.
Exactly. And I think that when I say there's no room for racism, I'm not saying there isn't racism in the church.
Yeah.
That there is racism
Yeah.
in the church.
Yeah.
But as a believer, there is no room in your life for you to make decisions based on a person's race.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and to be honest, the way that they're setting up our country, with this whole DEI thing, it's actually enforcing more racism than it is taking racism out of the picture.
Yeah. But that's a racist comment.
Well, I mean, whatever. I'm a Christian nationalist. So you guys got to pray these things in. The listener, you need to seek the scriptures. You need to draw near to God. But one thing that you also need to do is you need to be active. You need to be an active believer in your community, in your fathers, in your house first. If you're not active in your house, you're not going to be very useful to the community. You need that love. Your first love is Christ, then your wife, then your kids, in that order, and you're responsible for that.
Yep.
And to be honest, I think if husbands and dads took on that responsibility, these things would just naturally work themselves out.
That right there, if every man in the church said, and I'm guilty of this.
Yeah.
Okay. I sent my kids to public school and I shipped them off to Sunday school, and I let somebody else handle their religious upbringing. But I believe that if every Christian man today would say, as of today, I am taking full responsibility for the spiritual upbringing of my child or my children, in 10 years, we would see such a difference in this country. It would be phenomenal. It would be a tidal wave.
It would just be insane. And, you want to, Christian man, if you want to be a Christian nationalist, get your family in order.
Yeah.
Take care of your family. Take them to church.
Yeah.
You go to church. You teach your wife the Bible.
Exactly.
And a lot of people, men, I think they sometimes feel inadequate because they don't know the Bible themselves. But what's interesting is that I told this to a man the other day in church. I said, look, you already have the anointing of God to be the leader on your house. God's already anointed you in that position.
Yeah.
So if God's for you, what can be against you?
Right.
Go lead your family.
Right.
Do it. It's like homeschooling kids. People kind of get intimidated by, well, I don't know that I can do algebra and do these things. Well, you only have to be that far ahead. You only got to be 1 week ahead of them.
Yeah.
You don't need to be a professor.
No.
You just got to look at the lessons 1 week ahead and then teach your kids.
And both with homeschooling and with teaching Bible to your family, there's so many resources available. I mean, there's just no excuse to say, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Or I'm not capable of doing this.
Yeah, and this is a thing that's going to require faith too.
Yeah.
I think we have these conversations a lot. I always see this meme on X. I'm on X a lot, and it is what radical used to look like, and it shows like, probably what you look like in the 80s with long hair and, listening to Dee Snider and Twisted Sister. I'm sorry, 70s, listening to Journey or whatever.
There you go.
So it's like, this is what radical, and he's like drinking a beer and, it's all crazy and he's got the long hair and wear a weird outfit. And now they say, this is what radical looks like today. And it's a guy walking his family to church.
Yeah.
And it's so true though.
I think it is true.
Yeah. And so what requires faith is when you step into that and you and your wife discuss these things of how are you going to raise your kids? How are you going to educate your kids? I get it. The economy we live in is not built for the family.
It's not.
And that's, I think, intentional, to be honest. I personally think it is.
I think it is too.
I think the family unit being destroyed is another reason of why we're at where we're at. And everything out there is against, this is what's encouraging though. So everything out there is against you leading and raising your family, except for God.
Yeah.
God is for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also we get this idea that I'm going to teach my children the Bible, or I'm going to teach my wife the Bible. I need to go to seminary and learn everything there is to know before I can do that.
Right.
No, it's one step at a time.
Yeah.
You open up the scripture and you read a couple of verses and you talk about it.
Uh-huh.
It's not, you don't have to be an authority.
Right.
You have to be willing. And if you're willing, God will use you.
And that is where it starts. I can't get away from this idea of, you want to see a Christian nation, you want to see your nation flourish in Christianity, disciple your family, disciple your kids, take them to church, homeschool them. If at all costs you can homeschool and do whatever it takes, make the sacrifices you need to do it. I get it. Not everybody's going to be able to do that, but trust God, trust the plan, and go for it. Yeah. And watch what, like you said, 10 years of that. Oh, who knows what could happen out of that.
Yeah.
And then the whole top-down thing that people are worried of with Christian nationalism, I think it'll work itself out because look, our kids, our grandkids, they are future lawyers and future politicians and future this and future that.
Yeah.
So we're raising, and this, I know this is going to sound crude or crass, but while we're having kids and raising our kids to do these things, the left side, they're aborting their children.
True.
It's sad. And I don't want to see that. I don't want to see another child aborted at all. I don't want to see that. But
or they're putting children in marriages where there's 2 men or 2 women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, yes, surrogacy births that are given to 2 men or 2 women, I think is, you're selling, it's almost like you're prostituting children because you're selling them.
Yeah.
So, this is the culture we live in.
It is.
And this is how we fix it. And that's why I'm okay calling myself a Christian nationalist, because I want my nation to be Christian. I don't mean like a redeemed Christian, but I mean like a nation that shines so bright to the rest of the world because it honors Christ.
Oh, for sure.
And there's no shortage in the Bible of the talk of nations honoring Christ.
No, none at all. It's all.
That means we can do it.
We can and we should.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll start on the worldview next one then.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah.
How much you got there? A lot?
You could.
I don't want to rush it because we only got 9 minutes. So
I could give an interview.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
So first of all, everybody has a worldview.
Wait, hold on, back up. Yeah, so the reason why we're going to go into worldview is because this conversation of Christian nationalism, or we'll just call it Christian obedience, requires activity on your part as a Christian.
Yeah.
And how you see the world is going to influence how you are active in this world.
Yes.
Okay.
So everybody has a worldview. You may not know you have one, but you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, the best example is a worldview is the glasses that you look at the world through.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're nearsighted and you have a prescription for your nearsightedness, you can see clearly. But if you have the wrong prescription, if you have a prescription for farsightedness, everything's going to be fuzzy.
Right.
And you're going to make decisions based on what you see that may or may not be grounded in reality.
Yeah.
So if you have a worldview that's cohesive and makes sense, then you're in the best position to decide how to live your life. And I'm going to say that the only legitimate worldview, the only one that aligns with reality, is the Christian worldview.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't disagree because I'm a pastor.
So
But I for sure agree.
yeah, I'm glad. So we talk about worldview. There's basically 4 or 5 questions that you need to ask yourself, and the answers to those questions determine what your worldview is. So the first one is, where did I come from? Okay, so we believe we were created by God.
Amen.
If you
In the
believe
image of God.
if you believe that from me to you by way of the zoo is your belief, you think you evolved over millions of years, then you're going to answer questions about where you came from differently than I am.
It's so funny. I'm laughing as you say that because I was listening to Joe Rogan and Elon Musk. Joe Rogan debated him, and Elon's talking about the future of civilization and how they've developed these rockets and we're going to get to Mars soon. And then he made the comment, not bad for a bunch of monkeys.
Yeah.
And I'm like, gosh, you're so smart, but you're just so far off.
Yeah. So where did I come from? That's the first foundational question to ask. Where did I come from? And then the next question is, who am I? So again, if you believe that you are the product of random atoms mixing together and molecules forming and electrical synapses in your brain, then you're going to live your life differently from someone like me who believes that I'm created by God, I'm made in God's image,
Right.
and I have a responsibility to God.
This is so true.
As a result of that. And then the next question is, why am I here? Why are you here? What's your purpose?
Man, everybody should ask themselves that question every single day when they wake up.
Yeah.
Why am I here today? Why did God give me another day here?
Exactly. Why am I here? So once again, we go back to the foundational question, where did you come from? So if you came from the random chance, then there's really no reason for you to be here. It was just chance.
Yeah.
So whatever you do today doesn't matter.
And I mean, we're seeing that play out.
We are seeing that play out.
Just do whatever feels right. You know, the Bible talks about this in the book of Judges where everybody did what was right in their own eyes. And if you ever read that book, it's like the worst one in the whole Bible.
Yeah, for sure. So then the next question is, how should I live? So I've answered, where did I come from? I was created by God. Who am I? I'm a creature of God. I am a child of God, and I have value and importance because of that. I also have a responsibility to God. Then why am I here? God has put me here for a specific purpose.
Yeah.
And we can go talk about God's will some other time because that's a whole nother
for sure
story, a whole nother issue. But I believe that that God put me here in this place at this time for a specific purpose.
Amen.
And then the fourth question is, so because of those first 3 answers, how should I live my life? And so again, we go back to, I'm just a product of random chance. It doesn't matter what I do. It's, me. I don't have to worry about you at all. I'm going to take what I want from you. I'm going to treat you however it makes me feel good.
Right.
And that's where we're at in our society today.
Yeah. Yeah. Most people's moral code is, well, as long as you don't kill somebody,
Right.
you just hurt somebody physically.
Right. As opposed to my answer to that question, how should I live? Which is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
The golden rule.
When I was in school, that was taught as the golden rule.
Yeah.
That's different. So I'm not going to abuse you because it makes me feel good.
Right.
Well, maybe sometimes I will.
He's talking about me specifically.
Yeah. But I'm gonna treat people like I want to be treated. And then you can add a 5th question to this, and that question is, what happens after I die? And that question really answers the idea of why is my life important? What is going on during this time in my life And how is that going to affect after I'm dead?
Right.
So if I believe that after I die, I just snuff out and I become molecules in the universe, then
matter how
once
you
again, we're back to,
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm going to eat, drink, and party and,
Yeah.
you know, live
Sex,
my
drugs,
life.
and rock and roll.
Yeah, for
journey.
sure. And I've gone down that road. It's not a pleasant road.
Me
It doesn't-
too, yeah,
It
it's
doesn't
not.
end in a good place.
I'd hope that none of my kids and nobody else in my family has to ever go down that road.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll unpack those on Thursday. We'll do this again on Thursday.
Okay.
Well, maybe I told you Monday, but maybe Thursday. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
As long as you're here.
I'll be here.
Okay. So we'll unpack those a little more on Thursday. I know this is a one-way conversation. We're talking and you're listening. And while you're listening, you probably have all these questions. Again, shoot us the questions. Email every question to Mark at Buell Bible Church so he can take care of those. Just kidding. But
that's fine.
comment on YouTube, comment on Facebook. If you have questions, please ask the question. We're talking about this highly debated issue, and everything we're going to focus on with worldview is really what's establishing what we mean by being a Christian nationalist.
Okay.
All right. See you guys later.